I am happy to get this opportunity to share some of my Eastern and Oriental thoughts on a subject which is of great importance all around the world, and that is the subject of education, particularly institutionalized education or education in regular institutions like schools, colleges, universities. Sometimes people do not understand that there is a different aspect of education that is given prominence in the Eastern society compared to the one that is done in the Western society. In the East, education is considered something that keeps on going even when a student is not actually in the classroom. The classroom education is considered to be something of an academic course of learning, of acquiring information, of getting knowledge of facts and numbers, not so much getting educated into a personality that has real knowledge, wisdom, experience, the applicability of wisdom to everyday life. Those things that come by real education are not considered to be developed mainly in the classroom of an institution. The Indian emphasis, or the emphasis in Eastern society generally, including the Japanese, Chinese, Middle East countries, has been on a special personal relationship between the student and the teacher. In India, we call it the Guru-Chela relationship. The Guru standing for the teacher and the Chela for the taught, the student. It has also got some spiritual ramifications because the Guru was traditionally not only a teacher of knowledge of this world, but also teacher of the higher knowledge which prepared one for the life beyond this human life. Therefore, the educational process in the East was very much tuned into the development of spiritual values, of higher values that exist even outside the known physical laws of this universe. What is the basic difference in the institutional educational system that we observe in the West and the traditional educational system that we can read about, learn about from the East? The basic difference is not in the type of institutions that one sets up. It is not even the type of buildings or classrooms that are utilized. It is in the approach to education itself. In the Western institutional educational process, the emphasis is on the sharpening of the human mind, of improving the skills of logic and reason, of making a person more adept in using the thought process, of using the process that we call a mental process or a mental activity. This is the main emphasis placed in the Western institutionalized form of education. On the other hand, in the Eastern system, the emphasis is on building up the inner personality of a person, the inner voice that speaks like the intuitive process that gives information and knowledge suddenly in a flash without involving the thought process. That is not a mental exercise. That is not always logical, but is always more authentic. That has more of wisdom in it than of learning in it. This emphasis would properly belong to the intuitive process rather than the mental process. And it highlights the type of education that was imparted by the gurus to the chelas in the East. Not only is education faulted by being made a mental exercise, it is further faulted by being made an institutional exercise. Even if it was a mental exercise between a teacher and the taught, it would have been much less dangerous than it has become by becoming institutionalized. Institutions they tend to build a platform of their own. They tend to set up their own value systems. They tend to create a framework which traps the student as well as the teacher. I have observed that the teachers who work in institutions are not free to teach. They have to teach according to certain norms and according to certain rules laid down by the institutional system. In fact, institutional systems have grown around those norms and those frameworks, and therefore they restrict even the freedom of the teacher to teach. Therefore, institutional education is even worse than ordinary mental education. At least in a mental education, one is always open to question the very process of education. One has the ability to question the very process of the mind that is being employed to educate one. But in the case of the institutional process, one is not allowed to question except within the bounds laid down by that institution. Even in some of the best universities, you will find that rules and regulations and traditions of that university or that institution restrict the freedom of education. They prescribe certain courses, they prescribe the kind of syllabi that has to be observed. They are very, very restrictive in the type of education and learning that can go on in that institution.